Hey everybody, it's Public Enema. 2023 was a fantastic year for games, and 2024 is shaping up to be just as good, if not better. 2024 is almost here, so I thought it would be fun to look at 10 games that I cannot wait to play next year. But to personalize the list a little bit, I'm splitting it between 5 games from my backlog and 5 games that are new releases coming in 2024. So anyway, here are the 10 games that I can't wait to get my hands on, or clear off my backlog. Let's take a look. First up on our list is Granblue Fantasy Relink, releasing for the PS4, PS5, and PC. It was originally announced back in 2016, but is finally seeing a release in February of 2024. And typically with games that have been in development that long, my enthusiasm is a little reserved. But when Cygames announced a demo that would be dropping in January for the game, my interest was piqued once again. And I've never played a Granblue Fantasy title, but one thing's for sure, this game looks absolutely gorgeous. The trailers have showcased some fluid-looking action combat developed by Platinum Games, and the game boasts a large roster of playable characters sure to fit any playstyle. I like what I've heard of the music for the game so far as well, and I love the art style. I'm still hesitant to get too excited for this release, based on its long development history, but the demo releasing in January goes a long way towards hedging some of my fears. Either Cygames knew I wasn't the only one a little leery about the game's long development cycle, or they know they have a possible hit on their hands and are trying to drum up some excitement. Either way, I'll be downloading the Granblue Fantasy Relink demo on day 1 to give the game a try. At number 9 on the list, we have Unicorn Overlord, releasing for PS4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox Series X and S. Unicorn Overlord is a strategy RPG due for release on March 8th of 2024 and is being developed by Vanillaware. In this game, we'll follow the story of Elaine and his struggle to win back his throne from General Valmore. After being blown away by 13 Sentinels' Aegis Rim, anything Vanillaware does has my attention. Seriously, if you haven't played 13 Sentinels yet, you should hop on that, but that's a video for another time. Unicorn Overlord's artwork is gorgeous. The sprite work on display here is truly a marvel, and the game promises to have a pretty unique battle system, incorporating real-time elements with strategic gameplay. The overworld also appears to be open, which allows for the player to explore and tackle the game in the order that they would prefer. One of the best parts of 13 Sentinels was being able to tackle each character's story in any order for the most part, and it allows for each player to have a mostly unique experience, so hopefully Unicorn Overlord can tap into that magic here. If the plot is even half as good as 13 Sentinels, then we're all in for a treat. If I have a concern for Unicorn Overlord, other than its ridiculous name, it's the release window. Spoiler alert for future entries on the list, but a March release puts Unicorn Overlord smack in the middle of a couple of other highly anticipated releases. Due to that, this may not be a day 1 release buy for me, but it's absolutely a game that I'm looking forward to sinking my teeth into once I have the time. Continuing with our trend of ridiculous game names, here's the first backlog casualty of 2023. Octopath Traveler 2 was originally released in February of 23 and has actually come to Xbox for the first time this year. I loved my time with the first Octopath Traveler on the Switch. The HD 2D art style is fantastic, and Octopath boasts some of the best music from any RPG in recent years. So why did I pass on Octopath 2 last year? I don't know, blame Falcom. Between Trails of Azure and Trails into Reverie, and with Final Fantasy XVI sandwiched in between, I just ran out of time. I didn't want to feel rushed to get through Octopath 2, so it was relegated to backlog status. But that changes in 2024. Everything I've heard about the game implies that it improved on nearly every aspect of the first game. And I'll acknowledge that the first game was flawed in many ways, but I still really enjoyed it. Most of the individual stories were good enough to keep my interest, while the battle system, art direction, and music were enough to keep me hooked. I love the flexibility of choosing my own path through the game, and I'm very glad to hear that the stories in the sequel have more overlap and make a more cohesive experience. I'm really looking forward to sinking my teeth into Octopath Traveler 2 in 2024. I'm not sure when I'll fit it in with all the new releases coming next year, but I'm ready to fall in love with another stellar soundtrack, more HD 2D goodness, and a strategic battle system that keeps things interesting. Another backlog entry in Lunar Silver Star Story Complete comes in at number 7. Originally redone for the Sega Saturn in 1996 and ported to the PS1 in '99, I'm not really sure how I managed to avoid this game until now. In my Gateway RPG collaboration video, I was caught off guard with how many commenters mentioned Lunar. And that's ultimately why I decided to fast-track the game to the front of my backlog and make sure I get it played by the end of 2024. I really enjoyed my time with Grandia, which is another Game Arts title, and I'm hopeful that Lunar also has some of that RPG magic that made Grandia so memorable. I don't know much about the game outside of it being known for its animated cutscenes, so I'll be going into it fairly blind. It took over 2 decades, but I finally knocked The Legend of Dragoon off my backlog in 2023, and that's the plan with Lunar in 2024. It's time to finally play through this game that served as a good gateway into the genre for so many fans. And maybe I'll try and make this a yearly tradition, find something from the PS1 or Super Nintendo era that I've just skipped for some reason, finally clear it off of my gaming backlog for good. At number 6, we have Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. After backing Eiyuden Chronicle on Kickstarter years ago, I'm so excited that it's finally releasing in April of 2024. I'd loved the Suikoden games growing up, so you can imagine my excitement to see a spiritual successor from Rabbit and Bear Studio, made up of former Konami folks, smash through its Kickstarter funding goals. The art is beautiful, and the gameplay really does seem to capture the essence of what made Suikoden so amazing all those years ago. Raising an army, building a base, one-on-one duels, a huge recruitable cast, and large-scale battles all are present. I really can't wait to jump into Noah and Company's story that feels so reminiscent of Suikoden 2. Similar to Granblue Fantasy Relink, this game was announced years ago, and has been a long time coming. And with that in mind, I'm trying to hype responsibly, but it's not easy to see a spiritual revival of such a beloved franchise as Suikoden, and not feel giddy. My hope is that Eiyuden Chronicle is able to carve out its own legacy and become something more than the groundwork that Suikoden laid before it. The title has so much potential, and I cannot wait until I can finally get my digital copy from Rabbit and Bear, although I'm definitely kicking myself for not backing enough for a physical edition. The best part about Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes? It reminded Konami that it used to make real games and not pachinko machines. I feel like Eiyuden Chronicle is directly responsible for the Suikoden 1 and 2 remaster that we're supposed to get next year. And it may be a pipe dream, but hopefully this leads to a Suikoden revival in the future. At number 5, we have Baldur's Gate 3. Shocker of shockers, a non-JRPG enters the list. I do like to dabble with Western RPGs from time to time, with the likes of Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age Origins being some of my favorite games I've ever played. I've never actually played a Baldur's Gate game, but with the reception that 3 has received since release, I'd be foolish to skip it. I was on the fence on release, simply because there were mixed reports of how well the Steam Deck was able to run the game, particularly in the late game. I didn't want to invest hours into the game and then reach the end and it be an unplayable mess. But it seems those rumors were maybe a little unfounded, or the issues have been patched out. Either way, the issues were enough to push me towards deciding to play Baldur's Gate 3 on my PS5 instead. Then, when Larian Studios announced a deluxe physical edition for the PS5, I couldn't help myself. The shipping date is still to be announced as of right now, but hopefully it arrives in a lull in the 2024 release cycle, because I'm sure this game will consume me once I start it. I know this was many people's game of the year for 23, so I'm really looking forward to jumping into it. I've only dabbled in the D&D universe a handful of times, although it's totally something I would love to do more often if I found a good group to play with. This feels like the perfect chance to dive into the Baldur's Gate series. Hopefully I'll find myself hooked, then I can track down the first 2 games in the series and go down that rabbit hole as well. JRPGs will always be my favorite genre, but there's definitely room for their more Western cousins on my game shelf. At number 4, we have Chained Echoes. Chained Echoes was released in December of 22 by Matthias Linde and published by Deck 13 Spotlight. Linde credits classics such as Xenogears and Final Fantasy VI as inspiration for Chained Echoes, and any game that references Xenogears as a major influence definitely has my attention. The biggest reason I haven't played Chained Echoes is that I wanted a physical copy of the game. I pre-ordered from First Run Games back in January of 23, but it is yet to be shipped. And the website lists Q4 of this year as the estimated shipping date, so hopefully my physical copy will be here soon. This title has received so much praise. It's hard not to compare it to Sea of Stars, which ended up being one of my favorite games from this year. It's really cool to see how indie developers are breathing new life into the turn-based RPG landscape. Chained Echoes pixel art looks great, the sprite animation is top-notch, and the game features fast, turn-based battles, featuring both mech battles and on-foot clashes. And the story spans multiple generations. This game is so ambitious, and based on the reception it's received thus far, it's delivered on a lot of its promise. It blows my mind that this was mostly developed by one person. and I can't wait to get my hands on the physical copy and finally give this indie-developed gem the time it deserves. At number 3, we have Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Yes, you heard me correctly. As a self-professed JRPG addict, how the hell have I not played Xenoblade Chronicles 3 yet? I mean, Xenoblade 2 is probably my favorite game that I've played on the Switch. At Xenoblade 3's release, I opted to wait until all the DLC was released for the game. These games are so long, I didn't want to play the game at release, only to want to replay it again as the Future Redeemed DLC dropped. Then when it finally released in April of 2023, simply just didn't find the time to fit in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 into my schedule. It's an omission that I plan to remedy soon in 2024. I loved my time with Xenoblade 1 and 2. They are two of my favorite games on the platform, so I have full confidence that Xenoblade 3 will be amazing. I love exploring the huge open areas. The games are full of humor and memorable characters that you can really connect with. The art style is gorgeous, and the music never disappoints. As a side note, what does it take for Nintendo to release the soundtracks on streaming platforms already? This is the highest ranked backlog title on the list for a good reason. Cannot wait to jump into Noah and Mio's story and experience the conclusion of this Xenoblade trilogy finally for myself. And I fully expect this title to be near the top of my list for the best games I played in 2024. At number 2, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Here we are, the top anticipated game for the vast majority of JRPG fans for 2024. The first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy was amazing. The difficulty in taking one of the most important video games of the past 30 years, one of the most loved, and turning it into something new, but also something so familiar, cannot be understated. How Square managed to flesh out the Midgar portion of the original game to this extent is still mind-blowing to me. Midgar felt real and alive, as did our Avalanche companions. Square succeeded in not only remaking this beloved game, but also managed to make it something new, which is absolutely brilliant. Not only do I want to see how the old areas from the original are realized on current-gen hardware, but I also can't wait to get back into the remake trilogy just to see what changes are in store. It's amazing how Square has balanced the old with the new in this remake. It feels like this is the entry where Square doubles down on making the remake trilogy its own thing, perhaps stepping out of the shadow of the original release. Each trailer thus far has showcased something for me to get excited about, from the Gold Saucer to the Tiny Bronco to the possibility of Red 13th riding a chocobo. February 29th can't get here soon enough, and this is a no-brainer buy on day one. Unfortunately, I just happen to have that week off from work, so I can focus on following Cloud and Company's journey from Midgar to the Forgotten Capital. So with all that gushing aside, how is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth not the top entry on the list? Well, you can blame Falcom again. At number 1, my most anticipated game for 2024 is The Legend of Heroes: Trails Through Daybreak. The Trails game was my most anticipated title in 2023, and that won't change for 2024. Originally released in 2021 in Japan, the next arc of the Trails series is finally coming west at some point in mid-2024. It blows my mind that the Trails series is 10 games deep already, and Falcom states that Daybreak is the first game in the second half of the series. For years, Trails fans have been hearing about the Calvard Republic, and now we'll finally have our chance to explore it. We'll get to know Van and a whole new cast of characters as he investigates a case that could shape the fate of the entire nation. Although they typically set a slower pace, I've always loved the first game in each new Trails arc. Falcom really shines when it comes to character building and development, so it's always a blast to get to know a new group of characters. And the further the series goes on, it's always great to see returning characters, and based on the trailers, there may be a few familiar faces popping up throughout the game. The graphics have been improved from the Cold Steel arc, and you know the music is going to be great. Falcom Sound Team JDK are some of the best in the business when it comes to crafting memorable tracks. The battle system also appears to have been refreshed, so it should be a nice change of pace after largely following a similar formula for the last several games. I've been having an internal debate for a while now about which RPG series is my favorite. For years, I would have answered Final Fantasy without skipping a beat, but Trails has slowly been encroaching on the number 1 status. It's odd, because I feel like the biggest strength for Trails is probably also its largest hindrance. We've spent 10 games so far learning about the inner workings of the continent of Zemuria, and that's an incredibly high barrier of entry for trying to entice a new player to the series. But no other franchise can match its level of world building. In the past, the first game of each new Arc of Trails series has been presented as a starting point for the new player. Sure, starting with Trails in the Sky would be best in my opinion, but perhaps Trails Through Daybreak could be a good entry point for a newcomer to the series. Either way, it leaves me excited for what the future holds for the Kiseki games. I, for one, cannot wait until this is released. I have my limited edition pre-ordered and will be dropping everything for Daybreak as soon as I have it in hand. After shooting an unboxing video, of course.
So there are the 10 games that I'm absolutely going to make time for in 2024. 5 from the backlog, 5 new releases, and hopefully some others sprinkled in along the way. But anyway, be sure to let me know in the comments down below what are the ones that you absolutely cannot miss in 2024. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.